Of ASM friend and former Apollo and shuttle structural engineer Gary Allgire.
Pleasure to be here again today.
Gary, it's always a pleasure to have you here. Our Stay Curious listeners love what you bring to our program. He worked for 35 years
33.
almost? 33 years. Tell us what you did.
Well, I worked on the Apollo program on the Apollo spacecraft and service module. And then after the ASTP, when we docked with the Russians, went over to the space shuttle as the lead structural engineer and worked on the shuttle for most of my career after that until I retired in 2001.
Now, Gary told me a structural engineer. I go, what's that, Gary? And you told me what?
I own everything except anything that has electrons going through it or fluids.
Okay.
So,
and so he is you're curious about the Buran, which
yes.
35 years ago flew for the one and done flight in 1985, or 88,
Yeah.
88. A lot of space geeks think they know about this vehicle, but watch this program till the end. You're going to find out this was Premier Brezhnev's answer to our shuttle, and it was a bomber.
Yes, it was a weapon system is what it was going to end up being. But I was curious because everybody that has talked about the Buran says it was a better shuttle than ours. And so I wanted to look at it and see, is it really better than ours?
And they said that why?
Because it could land without having any astronauts in it.
It did its 2 orbits in November '88,
yes,
unmanned,
yes.
uncrewed.
And it's a false statement because our shuttle would have landed with nobody in it automatically except for the astronauts. They said, we will not have that happen. And to make that happen, they took one thing out of the computer landing system, and that was the lowering of the landing gear. And so that's a manual switch, and that's the only reason why we have to have astronauts aboard.
I believe the pilot flipped that switch.
The pilot
or
flipped
whatever.
the switch as they come.
As the commander's
Yes.
flying the thing.
Yes.
And that thinking of computers in a shuttle gives me a segue to say hello to Marty Winkle, our producer here. Marty and I are entering our 4th year, Gary. We're so delighted that we've attracted wonderful authorities like you. Marty, how you doing today?
I'm doing just ducky, Mark.
Good.
After working on the computer?
Yes, we had a little snafu, and thank you to Trekkie Techie. She fixed the computer problem, and Marty was right on top of it and knew it was a near fatal thing going on there, but we actually had to pull out some of the computer parts and pieces and blow the dust out, and everything's working good today. So tell your friends to watch us on YouTube as we monetize that chart. As we're looking at this we're going to see a lot of pictures about Buran. You're going to see some you've never seen before, but a lot of them come from a group of people that have been trespassing on the property at Kazakhstan. YouTube is full of their clandestine type of entrance into these facilities. But we're kind of glad they did because no one would know the horrible shape they're in.
That's true. And what we have today is a collection of those pictures that they have taken since they got into the facilities. And it's not an easy thing. They have to trek 12 hours at night walking across the desert and carry their own food, their water, their camping equipment, and they can sneak in, and most of them stay over a day or 2 days, but some of them will go in there and get there in the morning and leave that evening. So it's a very, very treacherous thing. Most of these people are fairly young. We actually have 2 women that has done this trek also. But so that's how we get most of these pictures. Mm-hmm. It's hard to get information about the Buran and their energy support system that launched it. So I try to gather up as much as we can. I analyze it from an engineering standpoint to see how they compared building their shuttle versus our space shuttle, and I'll address some of those issues in there that I've seen.
Tremendous. And we're going to start the slideshow and listen to Gary. I want him to comment about this our green screen here. We know what that reminds me on the bottom is a carburetor that needs a new
yes,
not filter, new what you put between
manifold.
On there.
Base plate. The Russians are very, very big on horizontal processing, versus most of our programs, we do vertical processing. And it makes for, to me, a very complicated system to do this. And they spent probably just as much money developing that horizontal to vertical system that we'll talk about later. But this is the picture right now that you see is it's in the process of going from horizontal to the vertical position at the pad. This pad was also used for Gagarin's first launch, and it's located fairly close to where they processed the shuttle and also the segments in the main section of their Energia rocket. And we'll go through that process. And
good. That is the Energia rocket
at it.
that's poised there. Let's crank up our pictures here.
Yeah.
I want to go back to that one real
Yeah.
quick. Gary explained this beautiful picture at night. It was launched at night,
Yes.
strapped to the Energia rocket, and those are like a bunch of tubes attached.
Now the
to it.
tubes, one of them, the top one, the round tube, goes to we call the white room, and that's how the crew gets access into their shuttle. And then there's another tube, and it looks like it slides. There's a slide. It goes down into the base of the launch pad in case they board on pad, and then if they have time to get out before it blows up. Now the first crew that flew it actually had ejection seats, but this is the unmanned version of it. But they were going to fly 4 Buran flights before they would put cosmonauts in it to fly.
Cosmonauts probably appreciated that.
Yeah.
So here's the comparison. Gee, Gary, it kind of looks like our space shuttle.
It does.
How many KGB agents you think were in Titusville in the 80s?
Well, there was not there, but there were some in Washington D.C. And if you go over to Moscow tomorrow and you go to their museum where they have a display and they talk about their Buran, this guide will tell you that the reason why it looks like our shuttle is just, it's not because we copied it. It is because when you do all the calculations and use the secret sauce to build one of these, that's what it would look like.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not true. First of all, our space shuttle that NASA really wanted didn't look anything like that. In fact, if you come to the American Space Museum, you can see some of the models of some of the proposed shapes and sizes of the space shuttle. It was all dictated, this vehicle was dictated by the Air Force. They wanted a certain length of a payload bay. They wanted a certain amount of cross range. And the cross range is what dictated the double delta wings. And then, of course, they wanted to fly with nobody in it, but that's what the astronauts did. And the Russians really didn't pay much attention to the shuttle at the very beginning. But then when the Air Force got involved, they woke them up a little bit. And then the kicker was when the Air Force decided they were going to launch out of Vandenberg Air Force Base. And with doing that, they could go, not even complete an orbit. They could launch, deploy their whatever they were going to deploy, and come back in and land at Vandenberg without the Russians would ever know it. And so their military had a secret meeting with Leonid Brezhnev, who was in charge of Russia at the time, and told him that they were concerned that the Americans would be flying this over Moscow, and it could have some weapons in it, or they could capture some of their satellites. So he authorized the Buran project, which has kicked that off. Now they were way behind us in development. And so what they did is they had another agency that did all their secret design work for all their payloads. At this time, the internet system was coming up online, and so they went in and they broke into a lot of the university computers and also NASA computers and labs to find what data they could find. Now they had some experience from this because that's what they did when the French and the British were building the Concorde. They went in there and they had a spy, and he captured all their documents and drawings and brought it back to Russia. So it helped them build their Tu-144. So they were going to do that here. And so when they tapped into our system, they ended up finding out that NASA was putting out unclassified documentation and proposals about what the shuttle would look like. So once they noticed that, they started tracking the titles of the documents and also the number for that document. And once they had that, then they would contact a KGB agent in Washington, D.C. in the embassy. He would go down to the U.S. government's printing office, and he would give them that title and that number, and he would pay to have that printed, and he would gather that cut document up, bring it back, and then they would clandestinely ship it over to Moscow for their engineers to go through it. They ended up getting 3,000 of our documents that way. But the real one that they really drove them was NASA put out the wind tunnel data on the wings. And that saved them a lot of money because they used that data to develop their wing.
Very interesting. Well, Gary's going to take us to Kazakhstan where this thing is. These things are. And please strap on here. At the end, we're going to show you the military application for this.
I can't really. I know. There's 4 numbers on here. I mean, 1, 2, 3, and 4. That was the 4 facilities that they use out at the Baikonur. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Baikonur. And the number 4 is the actual launch pad. And then if you go back up to 1 at the very top, that is a horizontal processing facility for the Energia rocket. There was a main core with engines on it, and then there was 4 strap-ons. And they were processed basically horizontally. And then once they were completed, then they would, by rail, they had 4 locomotives attached to the devices, and they would pull them down to number 2, which was a vertical processing facility. And what they would do is the launch platform would have already been positioned in that building, and then they would rotate from horizontal to vertically each segment and install it into this launch platform. And once that was completed, they would roll back out, and then they would translate from vertical to horizontal. And then by rail, they would go over to number 3, where the Buran would be sitting. They would raise it up off of the ground, and then they would pull the Energia underneath of it, and then they would mate it. And once that was completed and checked out, then they would roll to the pad. And then there they would go vertical.
Interesting there.
Yeah. Now this is a view looking from the item number 3, which is where the Burans were located. 2 is that vertical processing facility. It was the tallest facility there. It was almost 550 feet tall. Wow. And then number 1 is the where they would process their Energia. There was 2 bays in there, so they could do 2 at a time. They doubled up on everything. You'll see here later.
That's VAB size, tall length there, not wide and.
But not wide. No, it was just.
Is this a 5-year-old picture or something like that?
This, I don't know when this was taken. This was taken from some of those people that go sneak in. All the facilities are in very, very poor shape. Again, you can see this building. The brown area, that is this right here, is the door, and that swings out. Well, I go this way, yes. Swings out on that arm out there, so that they can get this vertical stack out of the building. And there is right now a verification vehicle. It's not a real of an energy of they call it the M3. There's like 4 different versions that they were proposing to do certain different things, but that's there's one in there, but it's not real. And this is looking from number 2 there, looking back at 3. The building is in very, very poor shape. It's not being maintained. There's nobody in it. It's been gutted. Looters have been in there over the years and have taken out anything of any value, any copper or anything, instrumentation or anything that's out there. The walls, the paint's peeling on it. Everything's rusting. But that's it. Now looking back from number 3, the vertical processing facility, I will call it, you can see the pad there. That's pad number 110 or 63, I think is the other number. But anyway, that's where it would roll out to, and that's where it would be erected, and they launched from there.
And It's a night launch, not many pictures of that, but
No.
they did a lot of tests beforehand. Now,
Well, back in the '60s, they were looking at the glide, the lifting body concepts, and so they had envisioned to have this was a single piloted vehicle that eventually they could supposedly send into orbit. They never did. They did a bunch of drop tests off of one of the Bison bomber, and basically the same thing we did at Edwards with our lifting bodies. But they were going to re-erect that once Brezhnev said, let's do this. They thought, well, we'll go back and we'll see if that worked, because it had been discontinued. But then they realized that it was not a shuttle, so they canceled that part of the program again.
Mhm.
Now this
we miss. Yeah, we actually skipped a picture. There,
that's
so
okay.
it's
Yeah, we're there. This is an actual vehicle. This is equivalent to our Enterprise, where we did the approach and landing test off the back of a 747 out at Edwards. This is at Baikonur, and what they have done, the original concept of their space shuttle had two engines, one on each side of the vertical tail, and once they re-entered the atmosphere, there would be there's a little door that closes up the intake part of that engine, and it would flip down, and then they would power up the engines, and then they could glide and power themselves around, and that way they could make sure that they could make it to the runway.
Now this is a Buran size,
Right.
which we're talking. I'll give you some dimensions here in a second, but as the novices like I am look at this, one of the first things you notice different from the shuttle is the location of that nose wheel.
And I'll talk to that in a second. But it has the two engines they discovered was not enough power to fly that particular model. And it is a full scale model of the Buran. And so they added two more engines on the side. They're down below, and you can see the one. It's grayish looking. It did have an afterburner to it, and they flew this model 25 times, doing approach and landing with cosmonauts aboard, and it had enough fuel that they could only fly for 30 minutes. But that's what they did. Now, the nose landing gear is unique compared to our space shuttle. Our space shuttle, the landing gear is up forward underneath the forward OMS pod, whereas theirs is located behind the flight deck on theirs. Now, I think the reason why they did that overall is for this vehicle to really fly, they had to fly an extended length nose wheel system, because of what they had found is set on the runway, it had an upward angle, like we used to do on aircraft carriers. To get the plane up a little quicker, they would raise the nose up during the taking off. So they used that, and if it had been in the forward position, there would not have been enough room to, like on ours, there was not enough room to put that extended landing gear. Now, the original Buran, this gear did not extend as far, but that's the major difference between our shuttles and theirs, and it's the landing gear position and also the four engines.
These shuttles are about 122 feet long. Okay, give you a dimension size. They're 122 feet, 78-foot wingspan there. So there it is again in flight with a chase plane. Marty, you've got a question for Gary Allgire.
Yeah, Gary. The center of gravity would be different with the four engines in the back. Wouldn't that be part of the reason? Bring the nose landing gear further back?
No, I don't think that any had any problem to that. It's just that the location of their forward OMS pod, there was not enough room, and again, this had a longer landing gear nose system than the original, the one that they actually flew into orbit. So I think that had more to do with that than anything. It could just be balanced back out by putting different weight cages inside the payload bay. They had plenty of carrying capability as far as the shuttle. Their shuttle was actually they could carry more weight into orbit than we could.
Yes, that's we're going to talk about that. But here is that prototype, their Enterprise, in a German museum.
It's in Germany, and you can tour. They have one payload bay door closed, and then they have another one open, and we'll see inside there a little bit here. But the main thing physically, if you look at it from the outside and you compare it to our space shuttle, the elevons on this vehicle, their vehicles, was much larger. I would say it was 50% larger than ours. I really don't know why. I'm not an aerodynamics person, so
That's the panels at the bottom here. With the separation. Actually, ours has got 3 sets of
No, there's
ailerons on
only,
each
it's the
side.
same. No, it's the same.
Oh,
It's
okay.
two, yeah, 2 and 2. They just don't have the little, we call tail feathers.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Okay. Now this is back, the assembly of the Buran and all the other their shuttles was done in Moscow. And I don't know where in Moscow it was, but that's where they did it. And then they were airshipped up on the back of the Antonov 225 to Baikonur and then offloaded. And then some of them they finished completing the assembly of it in that building number 3, like we did with our OPFs.
Hmm. You were very impressed seeing pictures of the magnitude of their orbital processing facilities, as well as you said they're a little more sophisticated than ours, or
No, I would say not.
or more convenient.
No, I would
Okay.
I would not say that, but this building here is
Well, you said something that you liked them, not to.
well,
I'm wrong.
it's interesting that what they did, and they did not. They looked at it from a different perspective than we did. They looked at it from a weapons system platform, not from a scientific and to launch commercial payloads. Now, this building is 14 stories tall. It has offices everywhere, and these people that go out there, they walk through all those offices, and they are just in really, really poor
Mm.
condition. And I don't know how long it'll last before they have issues with that building. Now, there's two Burans in there. I'll call them Burans. One of them is a prototype. It's a non-flyable unit. And then there's another one called Pichka instead of Buran. If you look at this vehicle, the one closest to the bottom of the screen is a prototype. It's non-flyable, whereas on the one behind it is Pichka, and it was 95% complete before they abandoned the program. And you can see how dirty they get and rusty. And people can get into, it's very easy to get into the prototype. I haven't seen any pictures from people who've been in the other vehicle. But it's pretty high fidelity inside the vehicle or the unit when they get in there. And they've busted the upper windows that are on the aft flight deck. And people do crawl out through those windows, and they do walk on top of the payload bay doors.
And Gary's going to tell us about the sad fate of Buran itself. So,
well, we'll get
this
that.
is inside the cockpit.
This is the cockpit of the one that it was a flyable one at the time, had the jet engines. Well, take that back. This is the prototype, but it was a mock-up of the one that it was flown off the runways and not the deal. This is a mock-up of what the flight deck should have looked like. And they trained with this is comparable to ours. We used a lot of electronics, flat pane computer windows, and they used all analog and stuff like that. They weren't as sophisticated as ours. This
Gary maybe has set the stage. Our shuttle was approved in 1972.
Yeah.
The money was approved for it. Did not fly until April 12th, 1981.